Tonight, guilty on all counts for the killer who used his truck to deliberately run down a Muslim family. An emotional plea to stop the hate.
He intended to instill fear and terror in our hearts.
The grief and relief for the victims' loved ones.
Vivian's future was stolen from her.
Tributes to a murdered Canadian peace activist as Israel releases video of what it says is a Hamas tunnel on the grounds of the Gaza hospital it raided. Also, music mogul Sean Diddy Combs accused of rape.
I had never felt grief like I did when I lost that baby.
And new calls for Canada to offer leave for reproductive loss. Plus, magnifying a stellar discovery.
It's just very, very fluffy is really the word for it.
Universal awe over a strange and sandy planet.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. A self-described white nationalist who rammed his truck into a family because of their faith will spend at least 25 years in prison. That's the automatic sentence for first-degree murder. Today, a jury found the killer guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder, as well as 1 count of attempted murder. The vile 4-second act of hate killed 4 members and 3 generations of the Afzaal family. CTV's Adrian Gobriel is outside the courthouse in Windsor, Ontario tonight. And Adrian, a relatively quick verdict from the jury.
Omar, the trial took more than 2 months, though the jury's deliberations were far more swift. Less than 6 hours. A guilty verdict and vindication.
Such hate has no place in our society.
And now a weight lifted for a family and a community that have endured so much grief and terror.
While this verdict does not bring back our loved ones, it is a recognition by the justice system that the perpetrator of these heinous crimes is indeed a murderer.
The jury convicted Nathaniel Veltman on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder for plowing his pickup truck into a Muslim family out for an evening walk in London, Ontario in June of 2021, killing 15-year-old Yumna Afzaal, her parents Salma Afzaal, Mediha Salman, and grandmother Talat Afzaal. The lone survivor, a then 9-year-old boy who was injured during the horrific attack.
The victims, who were valuable contributors to the Canadian society through their hard work and education, were taken away abruptly, leaving a 9-year-old orphaned.
This tells me from the beginning that this jury had no difficulty understanding the evidence and had no difficulty understanding the law.
The Crown called it terrorism, a planned, deliberate killing of Muslims, and introduced a chilling police interrogation video during the trial.
I saw some Muslims walking down the street, and I was like, well, I guess if I'm wanting to send my message, maybe now's a chance. And I was like, I'm done putting this off. I'm just going to go do it.
The defense argued Veltman was suffering from mental illness and was under the effects of magic mushrooms. For Veltman, he pleaded not guilty. The conviction means an automatic life sentence with no chance of parole for at least 25 years.
He's in shock because he knows he's looking at 25 years in jail without hope of parole. So that's a shock to him, and he's absorbing that.
The Afzaal family will also have to live with the burden of this tragedy. While today's verdict marks the end of a dark chapter, finding true closure may be a lifelong journey.
We mourn, we heal, we will move forward together, inshallah.
As the verdict was read out in the courtroom, family and members of the Muslim community broke into tears, while Veltman showed no emotion. Omar?
Adrian, court will reconvene on December 1st to determine a date for sentencing. What else can we expect at that time?
The sentencing hearing will be moved to London, Ontario, and that's at the request of the Afzaal family. It will be closer to home, and over a 2-day period, they will be delivering what will be emotional victim impact statements. Now, as for the terrorism-related aspect to this case, Justice Renee Pomerantz, following sentencing, will share whether or not this was an act of terror.
All right, Adrian Gabriel on an emotional day in Windsor, Ontario tonight. Adrian, thank you. The conflict in the Middle East has contributed to a rise in hate in this country. And tonight there are new developments in that war. CTV's Annie Bergeron-Oliver on the latest video Israel released today to justify its raid on Gaza's largest hospital.
Buried beneath Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital complex, Israel's military claims it found a tunnel built by Hamas and a vehicle loaded with weapons. The discovery made on the IDF's second day of a targeted search of the hospital and what it calls Hamas's command center.
There is no center or control room for Hamas in this hospital. We avoid all the hospitals.
Medics in Gaza say they fear for the patients inside the hospital, which has effectively been forced to shut down.
We understand there are still 27 critically ill patients, around 280 staff, and between 3,000 and 4,000 displaced persons taking shelter.
In much of Gaza, internet and phone services have collapsed due to a lack of fuel. Just as many in the south received evacuation notices, a sign the ground war there may be expanding to where many have sought refuge. Israel asked us, the citizens of Gaza, to go to the south. We went to the south. Now they are asking us to leave. Where do we go, this man says. Despite international calls for restraint, Israel says its offensive against Hamas is crucial for getting the hostages back. The more we deepen this operation, the greater the chance of returning our hostages, said Israel's defense minister. Today, Israel's army says the body of one hostage, Yehudit Weiss, was found near Al-Shifa hospital. The 65-year-old worked at the kindergarten in Kibbutz Be'eri, where her husband was found dead. Canadian-Israeli Vivian Silver was from that same community. Today, her family and friends gathered to say goodbye to a highly respected advocate of peace.
I feel my mother's spirit in me made me stronger, a stronger conviction for a lasting solution.
The World Health Organization says it is looking at all options for a full evacuation of the Al-Shifa hospital, but they admit, Omar, that the insecure setting makes their options rather limited.
All right, Annie, thank you. The escalating conflict in that region is having a ripple effect here.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now!
One of the main bridges in Montreal was blocked during rush hour this morning by about 100 protesters demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. And at Concordia University, Jewish students who gathered today expressed concern about a rise in anti-Semitism.
We want investigations, expulsions, arrests, whatever has to be made, clear policy changes.
The campus saw violent clashes over the Israel-Hamas war last week. And an arrest today in the death of a pro-Israel protester in California last week. A college professor is now charged with manslaughter. Canada's Prime Minister and China's President stood right next to each other for the traditional photo op at the APEC summit today as tensions simmer between the two countries. CTV's Judy Trin is in San Francisco tonight. Judy.
Omar, Canada is not expected to make any big announcements here regarding any major trade deals. So for the Prime Minister, this is essentially a very high-level networking event with 20 other leaders in the Pacific Rim. Earlier today, we saw President Xi Jinping and Justin Trudeau stand beside each other during a group photo. The two leaders have said one word to each other this whole time, a brief hello. It's a sign the two are still miles apart on foreign policy. No private meetings were scheduled between the two leaders. Xi and Trudeau have not spoken since the G20 summit in Bali a year ago, when Xi scolded Trudeau for leaking details of their conversation to media. Their relationship has been rocked by allegations of Chinese political interference. Yesterday, U.S. President Joe Biden sat down with Xi to work through the irritants in their relationship, which Canada's special envoy for the Indo-Pacific strategy says shows a path forward.
We will continue, Canada will, to compete with China, to collaborate with China, to challenge China if that's necessary. And we've been doing all those things all along the way.
However, Trudeau did have bilateral meetings with 5 other Pacific Rim leaders, among them Australia, Japan, Vietnam, Thailand, and Mexico. But Omar, those meetings didn't result in any developments.
All right, Judy Trin in San Francisco tonight. Judy, thanks. And Canada's key allies are closely watching the unprecedented espionage trial of a former RCMP intelligence official. Final arguments were heard today. The lawyer for Cameron Ortis told the jury his client was on a mission to help, not hurt Canada. The 51-year-old is accused of leaking top secrets to alleged criminals. Ortis claims he was, in fact, trying to avert a serious threat. The Crown calling the story flawed. Ortis is the first Canadian to be tried under the Security of Information Act. And another high-profile legal case tonight. A woman is accusing American rapper Sean Diddy Combs of raping and beating her.
Last night, I couldn't even get an answer.
In a lawsuit, R&B singer Cassandra Ventura, known by her stage name Cassie, says she was 19 when she met Combs and that the abuse lasted a decade. Combs' lawyer calls the allegations, quote, baseless, saying Ventura demanded millions and threatened to write a tell-all book. Saskatchewan turned up the heat on the feds today. The provincial government tabled a bill to stop collecting the carbon tax, promising to lower gas bills. CTV's Kevin Gallagher has the details.
It is a pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried.
This new bill aims to prevent workers of Crown Corporation Sask Energy from receiving federal punishment.
Well, if somebody has to go to jail, I guess it's going to be me.
Saskatchewan won't collect the federal carbon tax on natural gas home heating bills starting next year, claiming the Trudeau government's recent 3-year carbon tax exemption for heating oil is unfair.
So this really isn't about fairness. It's about politics. It's about choosing climate change as a wedge issue. I think it's really unfortunate that we're in this fight again.
Any corporation like Sask Energy that doesn't pay the federal price on carbon can face hefty fines under the law. Directors can even face jail time. The bill would make the province the natural gas distributor instead of Sask Energy, something legal experts say would require Ottawa to rewrite its law.
It says the distributor of the natural gas is the person that sends you the bill, the person that owns the pipes, the person that actually delivers the natural gas to you. And that's going to remain Sask Energy.
Even if the federal government is on solid legal ground, Saskatchewan's stance could encourage other premiers to find ways to defy the tax.
Well, if they're not paying it, why are we paying it? And so it gets pretty ugly, actually.
Ottawa says heating oil is more expensive and dirtier than natural gas, insisting the break will allow people time to switch to a greener alternative.
The Prime Minister said that there would be no more carve-outs. I take my marching orders from the Prime Minister.
This latest divide over an important part of the government's emission reductions plan comes as the Environment Minister travels to Dubai for a UN climate summit, Omar, where he's promising more carbon pricing announcements.
All right, Kevin, thank you. Many Canadians don't have houses to heat because the cost is still out of reach. The latest numbers show a small increase in new builds, adding to the much-needed supply across Canada. Though, as CTV's Genevieve Beauchemin explains, on closer inspection, the cracks start to show.
In cities across the country, evidence of the housing crisis continues to mount faster than homes are going up. There was a slight and unexpected uptick in the number of shovels in the ground last month. The Canada Housing and Mortgage Corporation reports housing starts in October hit nearly 275,000, up from more than 270,000 in September, a 1% hike.
We're moving in the right direction, which is a bit of a minor miracle given what's happening with interest rates.
Government incentives and record high immigration levels perhaps pushing the number up slightly. But a breakdown reveals a starker landscape for those looking for a new place to call home. In Toronto, housing starts, especially for condo units that not so long ago were hitting record highs, are slowing.
Could be a sign that activity now is starting more to reflect what happened post-interest rate hikes.
In Montreal, the pace of building new units fell 43%. Developers in this city have been investing in rental property, drafting projects for low to mid-rise structures, a tough sell now.
Construction costs have increased, but now we also have our interest rates, and builders, it's more difficult to have projects that are financially viable.
Low supply, high demand, well, that's pushed up rents. And advocates have been demanding governments invest more in social housing to help the most vulnerable.
They have to cut somewhere, so they will have to cut in other essential needs like food, like medicine, to just try to pay their rent.
Today, Fredericton reported a third more people living on its streets this year than the last, while in Halifax, the city is scrambling to find more spots and shelters.
Most of us, I think, likely will be in this park in the cold for the winter, unfortunately.
The CMHC says Canada has to at least triple home starts to eventually restore affordability. Omar.
All right, Jen, thanks. Coming up, the push for leave after pregnancy loss.
We need to really think about the support that we're giving women when they're going through this process.
Growing calls for Canada to follow California's lead. A California jury has convicted a Canadian man of breaking into the home of former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and fracturing her husband's skull with a hammer. David DePep was found guilty of assault and also attempted kidnapping for trying to take the speaker hostage. Pelosi is a Democrat. DePep was into far-right conspiracies. He faces up to 50 years in prison. A recently passed law in the U.S. that offers leave to employees who experience a pregnancy loss is sparking a wider conversation here in Canada. But so far, the federal government remains stagnant on a proposal to introduce similar legislation. CTV's Allison Bamford with the new calls to help grieving parents.
Zoe Klein knows all too well the challenges following a pregnancy loss. She faced several chemical pregnancies before giving birth to her daughter.
The expectation to go about your daily life and be effective at work is not always reasonable.
California recently passed a miscarriage law that allows up to 5 days leave for grieving parents. It applies to a reproductive loss, which includes failed adoption, surrogacy, or in vitro fertilization, miscarriage, and stillbirth.
Something where women can take 3 to 5 days and really be able to find their footing and be able to grieve is important.
15 to 25% of pregnancies end in miscarriage, according to the Public Health Agency of Canada.
I had never felt grief like I did when I lost that baby.
Teresa Morrison experienced a miscarriage and a stillbirth within a year of each other. She was able to take mat leave after the stillbirth, but nothing was offered for her miscarriage.
Had there been a pregnancy loss leave available through my workplace, one, I would have felt comfortable probably disclosing to my coworkers or to my workplace what was going on.
In the 2023 budget, Ottawa proposed to introduce paid pregnancy loss leave for federally regulated employees, but so far nothing's come from it. Some provinces already offer this type of leave, but the length, eligibility, and whether or not it's paid depend on the jurisdiction. In Alberta, if a miscarriage or stillbirth happens within 16 weeks of the due date, the employee is entitled to unpaid mat leave.
We see so many clients accessing our center where return to work is such a key issue. Why wouldn't we want to make it easier for these couples that are going through this?
Many hope the move south of the border leads to stronger policies here. Ottawa says it remains committed to introducing pregnancy loss leave, but could not provide any further details. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Regina.
Still ahead, scoping out strange new worlds.
Very, very fluffy is really the word for it.
Up-close images of a sandy surprise in space. The James Webb Space Telescope has done it again. Its latest jaw-dropping discovery is in a distant constellation 200 light-years away. Jill Makashon shows us what astronomers have already nicknamed the Candy Floss Planet.
It's a strange world where it smells like struck matches and it rains sand with temperatures above 500 degrees Celsius. WASP 107b has been dubbed the Cotton Candy Planet, a gas giant about the size of Jupiter but with less mass. It has allowed astronomers to peer deeper into its atmosphere.
It's just very, very fluffy is really the word for it. The atmosphere extends out very far, and those are perfect conditions for the telescopes to be able to find what those atmospheres are made out of. So it's kind of a perfect target.
WASP 107b is one of the latest exoplanets discovered by the James Webb Space Telescope, one of more than 5,000 found so far. Its secrets unlocked by a team of European astronomers. They found water vapor and sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere and silicate, which the scientists believe evaporates and forms clouds.
This is a place where it rains sand. And I don't mean there's a sandstorm. I mean that sand evaporates and goes up and makes clouds, and then it rains sand. And that's not something people have thought about.
A planet more alien than we could have imagined, another secret unlocked in our exploration of the universe as scientists continue to use the technology of the James Webb Space Telescope to find the strange and wondrous beyond our own solar system. Jill Makishon, CTV News, Winnipeg.
And back here on Earth, a Major League Baseball franchise is on the move.
This is a terrible day for fans in Oakland.
The Oakland A's will be joining the Stanley Cup champion Golden Knights and the NFL's Raiders as big league teams in Las Vegas. The American League franchise will now relocate to a new stadium on the Las Vegas Strip that's scheduled to open in 2028. The last baseball team to change cities, the Montreal Expos, who moved to Washington in 2005. After the break,
to bring folks together and enrich their lives by doing so.
Driving home the message of hope and wisdom. If you're on the road in Newfoundland and Labrador, you might just see a new traveling home, a renovated school bus carrying the hopes of two volunteers bringing generations together. CTV's Garrett Barry with the message they're driving home.
They call it the old school bus, and this is where old meets new.
People are so confused right off the bat as to why we're here in this big white school bus.
Some thousands of dollars and a good bit of legwork transformed this old bus into the latest project by this duo. They went to school together, after that, separate paths. Aaron's work in seniors' homes and Claire's work as a childcare worker had them dreaming of a collaboration.
We thought, what magic could happen if they were brought together?
Now, they've worked for 5 years in Newfoundland and Labrador to bring families with children together with seniors.
There really needs to be more of an exchange because we've kind of failed both by keeping them so isolated. So that's what we aim to do, is to bring folks together and enrich their lives by doing so.
There's crafts, singing, drawing, and games.
And of all the activities that you can do on this school bus, it's painting that's the most popular.
We've had this thing painted from the underneath up to the top as far as they could possibly reach because it's really fun and novel.
As it turns out, the very concept of the school bus is a great way to make connections.
We get to hear a lot of people's stories about school buses, like their own experiences and stuff, which is fun. A lot of bus drivers in Newfoundland, apparently.
They visited seniors' homes hundreds of kilometers from St. John's and have asked for families with children to be part of their visits. And now, the pair would like to secure some long-term permanent funding, or some donations, which would let them devote more time to the project.
Ideally, we would have like 5 of these buses around the province, one in Labrador, one on the West Coast, but one step at a time.
The duo says that just spending time around children can help seniors feel more comfortable, expressing themselves without boundaries or judgment. Garrett Barry, CTV News, St. John's.
A portable canvas, great idea. That's a snapshot of this Thursday. Heather Wright will be here tomorrow. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching, and good night.